Hey everyone, Curse Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted. And here we have Arcades, the Strategist, Defender Tribal, coming from, let me find the right page, coming from News, who only says it's a first draft. All right, let's see what we can talk about with this first draft. I like Arcades, I like Defender Tribal, so I'll have a few things to say about it. Also, I think I'll have a few things to say about the idea of how we sometimes use our our tribal deck leaders in a way that may not be what we first assume. So, before we get any further, as always, the deck list you'll be seeing will be in the video description below. And if you'd like to send me your own deck for me to make a video of, there's a link in the video description for that as well. If you'd like the deck you send me to be the next video I look at or make, there's also a link to bring yourself to the front of the queue if that's what you want. But without further ado, let's look at Arcades, the Strategist. So, who are they and why are they the leader of our Defender deck? Well, they're a 4-mana Flying Vigilance 3/5 Elder Dragon in green, white, blue, that's Bant. And they have two main abilities. The first one is whenever a creature with Defender enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. And the second one says, each creature you control with Defender assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power and can attack as though it didn't have Defender. So one is just a benefit. The first one is a beneficial ability for defenders, and the second one is what allows us to attack with the defenders. And I'm going to heavily suggest that that first ability is the one you really want. The ability to consistently draw cards off of your creatures, basically adding the text of cycling, draw a card to every single one of your walls, is really good. And we're going to find a few other ways to get around that because it doesn't say cast. We were just looking at Volo, where Volo's ability is a cast trigger. Arcades is an enter the battlefield trigger. Now, there's some pluses and minuses to each, but enter the battlefield, we have more ways to play around with that. So let's take a look at the deck proper. Well, looking here, we have Arcades, and we have a pretty standard, I would say, tribal creature deck with 30-ish creatures and, some support spells in all different types, 36 lands, which I could see us going up to 38, but I'm going to suggest a few more mana rocks, so I think 36 could be fine. And let's take a look at the curve. The curve is pretty much what I predict, right? A lot of the good walls are at 2 mana, or a lot of the playable walls, let's say, and then after which they kind of slowly taper off. I really do like the low mana curve. I think it really behooves the deck, or behooves not, that benefits the deck, to have access to these kind of low mana spells when we can just keep playing them out with Arcades over and over again. So that's really nice. Then we're going to look, before we go much further, let's look at what's at our 4-drop, because Arcades is the main linchpin of our deck. So generally, as mentioned before, when our deck only really functions with Arcades out, most of our 4-mana spells will not, conflict with him. Like, we need him out to do anything, so there aren't spells we're going to cast above him. But before I say that for sure, I'll take a look. So we've got a bunch of very basic walls. Shield Wall Sentinel, will search for any wall. And then we have Wall of Stolen Identity that comes as a copy. And Creature with Defender. This is a bird token creator with defenders, which is fine. Cone of Cold is a ability that taps down. It's like a sleep, which we have right here, where you tap down all your opponent's creatures, and on a 50% chance, you kind of tap them down for 2 turns. You basically freeze all of the other creatures on the battlefield. And then Improvised Armor, which has cycling, so I'm not going to consider it to be 4 mana. All right, before we go any further, let's talk a little about the parts of the deck I like and the parts of the deck I don't like. And what I do like is all of the creatures. Now you might be saying, Cursed, you like Riptide Turtle? It's a flash defender. I mean, I like it for what it is. Let's be honest here. Our deck is pretty low power, and that's not a problem. A nice low power defender deck has no problems with it, and we're going to try to keep it in line with that power level because we don't want to, like, you know, grab Smothering Tithes and just like overpower the deck that way. We want to let this deck do what it wants to do, right? And cards like Riptide Turtle are just fun cards that you can play in your defender deck. So that's fine. What I don't like, I will say, is a large collection of these kind of toughness boosting abilities. Now, I have a friend that I play Commander with who plays Duran, and he plays similar cards like this. And I also don't get that either. What I'm going to suggest is when it comes to cuts, we're going to start here. Imagine that nice little idea that I've been talking about every now and then about win more, right? We have cards that are good in general. We got cards that are good in neutral, cards that are good when we're behind, cards that are good when we're ahead, and then cards that are only good with our commander. And when you look at these spells, right? Improvised Armor, Stone Skin, Tower Defense, Refuse to Yield. These are all cards that are only good with our commander out. At least Refuse to Yield adds some power, but generally they only add toughness, which only matters with our commander out. And they don't help you when you're behind. They can be a combat trick, but combat tricks rarely are the thing that is going to put you back into the game. They're really good when you're ahead and when you're at neutral. But being good when you're ahead and being good when your commander is out, that's a sign of a win more card. Even if it's good in neutral, these cards are very win more. They only work when you're ahead and they don't do anything otherwise. Like Tower Defense is fantastic to attack all your opponents at once and then, you know, cast Tower Defense and knock them out of the game. But when has that ever actually happened? And I'm not just saying that to be facetious. Seriously though, when has that happened? I've never seen that happen. It's so rare to have such a collection of defenders and with your opponents having relatively low blockers that you can actually take out multiple opponents at once. So instead, Tower Defense is the kind of card that just sits in your hand for, you know, a turn that maybe you can do 10 or 15 extra damage, and otherwise doesn't really do that much. And when you don't have creatures, it doesn't do anything. There's a card like this that I really, really like. Tainted, it's called, let's go by mana cost. Tainted Strike. Tainted Strike is a lot like this card, where it either does nothing or it does everything, right? Either you knock a player out of the game or you just give them like 7 poison counters and then they never get any more poison and that's it. You've basically wasted an attack. But the thing with Tainted Strike, and the reason I do kind of like it still, is you can at least target your opponent's attackers. You can either nullify, like gain 9 life for 1 black by, you know, stopping an 8/8, or I guess it's gaining 8 life, right? An 8/8 attacks you, you cast a Tainted Strike on it, you take 9 infect, but there's no other infect in the game, and you've just negated that much damage. Or, a lot more fun, when your opponent attacks one of your other opponents with like a 9/9 or bigger, you can make it lethal, and that's really fun. Now, the point isn't for this card for this deck. I'm just suggesting the idea that Tower Defense is really lacking that kind of malleability or that liquidity that you can use it in so many different ways. It just does one thing. So a lot of these cards I don't like. Tower Defense I don't like. Refuse to Yield I don't like. Escape from Orthanc. Crossbow Ambush just gives reach. I don't love that unless one of your friends plays a lot of reach. And then all of these enchantments, except for Birth of Melentus and Assault Formation for sure, these 3 can be removed. And then we can look at a few of these other ones here. I like the board clears. The board clears are very, very good. I like the ramp. I'm not quite sure what Impede Momentum really does. I would like that to be cut. And Cone of Cold and Sleep, like, don't play both. If you want to play one, play Cone of Cold, but I'm still not sure why you would play either of these cards. You're not, I guess it does allow you to attack, so I would probably play the Cone of Cold at least, because then you have 2 turns to take out all, all your opponents, and I do really like that. Okay, so these are the cards I generally want to cut. Once again, all of our wonderful creatures are just really good. I do like them. For the power level we're dealing with, I'm very happy dropping a Wall of Denial and attacking for 8. There's nothing wrong here. And our Planeswalkers are pretty good. They support the theme. I wish there was a way we could reuse them because they both don't have an uptick, but all things considered, I'm pretty happy. So what are the things I want to add here? Well, the first thing I mentioned before I'd like to add is a little more ramp. I'm adding the 3 talismans here, Unity, Progress, and Curiosity, because they are all the colors that we can play. I just want a few more mana rocks, because one of the big things of this deck is the fact that we can go through it so very quickly, right? The faster we go through it, the more mana we need to keep going, and just having a few more mana rocks, I think, would make a big difference here. They are also all notably 2 mana, and that allows us to cast our commander on turn 3 pretty easily, which I'm a big fan of, because the faster that Arcades comes out, the faster we're going to be winning the game. So big fan of that. Now, pretty much the rest of the cards here are going to be about Arcades' first ability. Whenever a creature with Defender enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. And there's 2 reasons for this. The first reason is that blinking our walls basically will draw us additional cards every single time we do so with Arcades out. But secondly, some of these blink spells, not all of them, but some of them can be played defensively to protect Arcades. This is one of the things, is the deck really does need your Elder Dragon to work. So we need to have a few defense measurements, like defense methods here to protect our commander and make sure we're still in the game. If Arcades dies maybe 2 or 3 times, you're kind of out of the game, and that's really rough. Like, you have to get into Assault Formation, or you have to get Walking Bulwark, both of which are feasible but not guaranteed. So having a little bit of blink, having a few other options can be good to protect Arcades. But first, two that's not protection. The first one is Soul Herder. I think Soul Herder works pretty well here. You know, they are an attacker. They can grow very steadily, which is really nice. But the fact that it's just an extra blink at the end of your turn, which is at least a card draw, with some of our cards have enter the battlefield abilities themselves, so that's even better. Do we have, you see, like Wall of Omens, and now I'm realizing, where is Wall of Flowers? Oh, it's not here. Is it not Wall of Flowers? Wall of Blossoms. Do we have Wall of Blossoms? We don't. Please play Wall of Blossoms. Wall of Omens and Wall of Blossoms are great Magic cards. Please play both of them. You play Wall of Blossoms, you flicker it, you draw a card off of the Wall of Blossoms, and you draw a card off of Arcades. That's really nice. You're going to be very happy. Likewise, another card here is Teleportation Circle. Now, this is 4 mana, but once again, we're not going to use it without Arcades, so it's not a problem. And with this, we're going to basically get a free flicker every turn, and we're going to be very happy with the results. Next, let's look at a few more blink effects. Ephemerate is by far the best blink ability, I would say, at 1 mana, where you will get 2 blinks out of it. The first one and then the rebound. That is at least 2 cards that you draw. And if you're using it for protection with Arcades to stop removal from hitting him, or her, I actually don't know, them, you can flicker them out, and then you just flicker one of your walls when it gets to your turn, which is really nice, so you still get the full kind of use out of it. The other one, which is half as good, of course, is Cloud Shift, also at 1 mana, to basically flicker one of your walls or your commander, protect them, and maybe get a card draw out of it. The other one here is Eerie Interlude. Now there's a few more at 4 mana, but I wanted to avoid being at that number. So with that in mind, you know, Eerie Interlude, and I think there's at least like Ghostway, I think is one of them, are worth playing, where this will blink your board, any number of the creatures on your board, your choice, and they'll come back at the end of the turn. What's really nice about Eerie Interlude is that this works against board clears because it allows you to have your creatures out until the end of turn as opposed to bringing them back right away. And you might be asking, does Arcades trigger when it enters at the same time as the walls? And the answer is yes, because Arcades still sees when creatures enter at the same time, they see each other entering the battlefield, and therefore Arcades will see your walls coming to play and you will draw cards. Now this one isn't blink, but I think it's worth saying. Rally the Ancestors is a very, very good reanimation spell. You're already playing Dusk to Dawn, which I do like, and this is a little bit like that. Now, granted, you will lose those creatures on your upkeep, but if you have something like Eerie Interlude, you can kind of get around that. I don't know if my microphone is picking up the noise outside. Maybe. We'll just talk over it. Anyways. Rally the Ancestors, you can blink all your creature, you can reanimate all of your creatures really, really easily, and then if you have Eerie Interlude, you can blink them so they stay on the battlefield. That's an option. You might also just be happy, you know, reanimating for 4 mana on your opponent's turns. You reanimate a bunch of your walls, get some abilities, draw 4 cards, and then, you know, they're around at the beginning of your upkeep, and you can choose if you want to save any. I think that's pretty good. I think by itself, it's a pretty good card. As I will say over and over, you know, sometimes players will get too caught up on the second line of text here. It is the card advantage engine that I think is much stronger here. And considering you have 30 creatures, because you might be thinking, well, Cursed, I'm going to lose those creatures forever, whereas I can use Dawn here to get them back. You've got 30 creatures. I don't think you're going to have 30 creatures in your graveyard. So you can use this mana, you can use Rally the Ancestors to like flicker back in 4 or 5, draw a bunch of cards, and then keep going without losing too much. So I do particularly like this. I do like it too because I think, though it's not a guarantee, I think it's highly likely that a lot of your walls will go to the graveyard through combat or board clears. They don't really have ways to, their sticking power is in their toughness, and a lot of removal will kind of ignore that. So this will be worth it for sure. All right, a few more support cards, and then we're coming to an end. Tokazia's, I always say Toskia's. Tokazia's Welcome is a enchantment that will draw you an extra card per turn as long as your creature that you play is 3 mana or less. Now, what I like about this is it triggers on other people's turns, so if you blink any of your creatures, you'll still draw the card. It's okay. It's an okay card. I wanted to put it in here because it will trigger off most of your creatures and it'll draw an extra card, but the more I think about it, the less you kind of want this because you want to be casting multiple creatures a turn and this only triggers once a turn, so I'm just going to probably take it off the list. Coming over here is Teferi's Ageless Insight, another 4 mana card, which I know is against what I usually say, but this card is just really, really good in this deck. It basically doubles all your draw except for your first regular draw and your draw step. And that's really, really strong. Now you can play Wall of Blossoms and just draw 2 by itself. But now if you play this and trigger Wall of Blossoms, you actually draw 4 if you have Arcades out, which is really, really cool. So off your regular walls, you'll draw 2. Off the card draw walls, you'll draw 4. That's really, really good. It's really hard to kind of interact with, and you're just going to get so much card advantage that you'll be pretty much set for any situation. So I do really, really like it. Excuse me. One more thing that I think is worth mentioning is Swords to Plowshares. This card just got reprinted again. It's always a good time to pick up copies. I highly recommend it. It is a nice removal spell in your colors. It is probably the best removal spell in those colors. And that's generally all I have to say with Arcades. This has been a shorter kind of episode because, well, it is a first draft, and I do get where we're at. And this is a quick reminder that if you want like more in-depth answers, you got to give me more in-depth questions. I'm very happy to give like a first look at a deck, but if there's something you really want to know about, please put it into the thing that you sent me. But let's summarize and conclude how we feel about Arcades. Well, Arcades is a really good commander whose main benefit is drawing a card when your defenders come into play. With that in mind, I wouldn't mind, first of all, adding a little more mana, which would be the talismans up here, in order to make sure that we can hit all of this, we can cast all the spells that we want to, which is really strong as our deck churns through itself. I also like you to remove the cards that increase toughness. Ooh, Discord is being loud. Cards that increase toughness because they don't particularly do anything for us unless we're winning and unless our commander is out, which is particularly bad. Likewise, so those are the auras, those are the instants. Then I'd like to add in a bunch of blink abilities, from Soul Herders to Ephemerates to Cloud Shifts to Eerie Interludes, because they will let you get extra triggers from your commander while protecting your creatures from targeted removals and board clears. And finally, a few support cards to kind of go a bit further, and you'll be really, really happy. If we want to go further with the deck, the next question I would have to be, what power level are we going for? Because we might have a few options to kind of change up what our goals are, because right now we're just in wall beatdown. And that's fine and great at this power level, but if we would like to power it up, we're just going to have to re-examine it. And then there's a few other things we could think about improving the lands and the like, but otherwise, I do particularly like this deck. I think this is a great deck to start off with. If you're a newer player or playing with people with pre-constructed decks, this should be more than a fine place to start, and you'll probably have a lot of fun with that. I hope this video was helpful to you. If you would like to submit your own deck to me, there is a link in the video description below. If you would like your deck to be the next deck I make a video about, there's a link to that as well, where you can skip the queue. Finally, if you'd like to like, comment, and subscribe, I would be very, very gracious. This channel is still growing, and any help at all is much appreciated. All right, if you're making Arcades, I really do like Arcades. I think they're a really, really fun commander. So I would be super, super down to see more Arcades decks in the future. And until then, good luck.